Hi there, I'm Sonal Kapoor. This is 5 Live, and today we talk about something that I'm sure has crossed your mind. What goes behind making of a radical terrorist? Why so many educated people, immaculate English-speaking people are turning radical? Are they targeted? Do they come from a childhood trauma? What goes behind the psychology of a terrorist and these modules? We'll get into that, along with also bringing you the latest on pollution. We haven't forgotten about that. And also, towards the end, we bring you our take and a reality check on whether or not these air purifiers that you see everybody hanging around their neck, does it really work? Stay tuned, we'll take you through all of that. But first up, the top story that we are tracking. Now, the Red Fort blast that killed 13 people has taught us one thing, that the recruitment model of terror groups has changed. Gone are the days when terror handlers targeted only young, poor or uneducated minds, when recruitment was limited to most marginalized pockets, or when engineering graduates were sought out to build IEDs. Now, in the Delhi explosion case, we've seen an entirely new pattern emerge. A major accused, including alleged bomber Umar Mohammed, are doctors. All of the major accused, in fact. Professionals who swore an oath to save lives, yet investigators say they were plotting to take them. So the question is, what pushed them down this path? How did minds trained for healing get radicalized for killing? This isn't the first time, remember, where medical professionals have been linked to extremist plots. The West has seen similar cases far many times. Analysts note that extremist groups exploit the fact that doctors move freely, attract less security and also enjoy public trust. And today, an undated video of Omar has sort of come out, surfaced as well. He's speaking calmly in fluent English, describing suicide bombing as martyrdom, framing mass murder as a path to heaven. So what transforms these individuals like Omar? What breaks inside a person that turns a healer into a weapon? Are they born this way, or do they get transformed? What are the early signs as well of someone drifting towards extremism? Why do some get radicalized while others really don't? We will try and find answers to all of these over the next 10 minutes. Let's welcome our guest a little bit. All right. Joining us very shortly will be Dr. Jayanti Datta. She's a criminal and sort of clinical psychologist as well. She helps us get behind the mind of a terrorist to see how exactly do these modules work. Remember, back in the day, we used to keep talking about how engineers were targeted. We've also been told by experts and authorities who are working in this space that there are terror recruiting cells, terror recruiting agents who go out and look for targets who they think would make a good terrorist. So there's a checklist of sorts that comes in. What exactly is that checklist? We will try and decode on the program. Also, we'll try and understand why some of the most well sought out students were targeted. One of them was actually a topper in her class. Did surgery, was teaching as well, Dr. Shaheen. What made her turn into a terrorist that she would go and plot against something as violent as this, something as inhuman as this as well? All right, so we look into all those details as well. So what do you see on your screen right now? Those are some of the research sort of papers we picked up. This one is coming in from author Stephen. He writes that doctors can buy sensitive supplies like chemicals. That also makes them a lucrative target of sorts. He also talks about Islamist doctors at an advantage of sort of confronting moderates as well, because their interface with people is so much more, so much longer as well. We're also looking at how what happened to the IM model, which used to target engineers. Has that shifted towards doctors as well? We look at all those questions, but in just a bit. Let's move on for the minute to take you through the very latest coming in on air pollution. Now, India's capital continues to live under a state of emergency, and its name is pollution. Delhi's AQI, in fact, all of North India is still hovering in very dangerous categories, firmly in the severe category here in the national capital, and people are falling sick, battling infections, and quite literally struggling to breathe. Yet there seems to be little urgency to confront this air apocalypse. Earlier today, I spoke exclusively with former WHO chief scientist, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, to try and understand, pretty blunt and simple, why don't people understand the urgency of air pollution? Her answer will shock you because she says we need to treat air pollution and attack air pollution like we attacked COVID. Listen in. We are truly delighted to have the time with the most respected, one of the most respected medical scientists in the world. Dr. Soumya Swaminathan is here with us. She's a former chief scientist of the World Health Organization, former director general of the Indian Council of Medical Research as well, and a pediatrician who has spent 4 decades of work on child health, infectious diseases, health systems. Really couldn't think of a better person than you, ma'am, to sort of understand both what's happening in clinics and also in policy rooms. So let me begin by asking you this. For several years, you have been speaking about the issue of air pollution. We have been constantly covering it as well. Why do you think air pollution does not become an urgent health issue, say like COVID or TB? Why is it, now that we know that air pollution will kill more people than the pandemic ever did, than COVID-19 ever did, or even more than tobacco claims to be, taking lives of, why is it that we don't see it as an urgent health problem?
No, thank you. That's a very important question. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One is, of course, that air pollution is something which is sort of invisible, though some days you can definitely see the smog. But even in cities where the air looks like it's okay, it's actually not okay. And you only know that when you measure and you look at the AQI and you look at the PM2.5 and PM10. So for most people, it may not strike them as a huge urgent problem. Second is it's slow. So you do have severe health effects from air pollution, but they don't happen overnight, unlike COVID, where you get sick right away, or you see people around you getting sick. And of course, a pandemic is something that creates so much of panic and fear. Whereas here, it is slow, it is invisible, it is acting on our bodies all the time, but it takes years sometimes to see the impact. And therefore, you don't necessarily make a connection between your exposure to air pollution and the health problems that you're facing today. So I think that's one reason. The second is that COVID, for example, everybody knew that it was a pandemic, it was caused by a virus, that the health department was in charge and had to act and was acting and so on, and everybody else was supporting. Here, the actions have to happen across many different sectors: industry, agriculture, transport, construction, solid waste management, indoor cooking fuel. And therefore, it's almost like a diffuse responsibility, and therefore it sort of gets diluted.
But talking about diffused responsibility, some people still think that pollution is a Delhi problem. Well, now we have decades of data really telling us very clearly that this is a North India problem. It's an Indian metro problem as well. So much so that 10 out of the 15 most polluted cities in the world are Indian cities. Do you think that narrative also needs to be specified, needs to be taken to the politicians?
You're very right. I would say that air quality or air pollution is a national problem. The reason is there's a lot of data now. Of course, we have many more monitors than we used to have in the past. And if any day you pick up the newspaper and look at the AQI from the different cities around, like today's newspaper, for example, I saw that almost all cities that were reporting were in the red. I've personally been in at least Bangalore, Bhubaneswar, Mumbai, Delhi, and Chennai in the last 2 weeks. And nowhere was the air quality anything that we could call good. So it's a national problem. It's a rural and an urban problem. The NCR region, for many reasons, gets a lot of attention and focus, particularly in these winter months, because there are also climatic variables which make the air circulation very slow and so on. But that whole Indo-Gangetic plain is impacted. And we have less monitors in rural areas, and so we focus on cities. In fact, our National Clean Air Program focuses on cities. And so we tend to neglect the rural areas. But I would say that 95% of the country does not have air quality according to whether, our own national standards, which is 40 micrograms per cubic meter, let alone the WHO standards, which is that it should be less than PM 2.5 should be less than 5 microgram per meter cube. So we're still far away from that. We need to have a stepwise approach, of course. We can't go from where we are to 5, but we can go to the WHO intermediate target, which is less than 35 micrograms per meter cube. But every millimeter difference we make will have an impact on our health. So it's really important not to get disheartened and say that things are so bad we can't do anything. No, we can do, and we can bring it down. And every little bit we do will show a good impact on our health.
Right. Ma'am, but I want to get down on the question of accountability here. This is a public health crisis, perhaps the biggest we have seen in India in far too long. Who do you think should be held accountable here for this health fallout of pollution? Environment Ministry, Health Ministry, local governments, like where does the buck stop really?
So this is a classical case where I think it is a collective responsibility. Now, of course, one says that. Then next step is, okay, somebody's got to take charge, to coordinate, to have a plan, to have metrics, to have indicators, to have very specific actions, and to follow those through. So I am looking at it something like how we tackled COVID. We had an empowered committee of secretaries. How did we do Swachh Bharat mission? How are we doing the Jal Jeevan mission? These are massive national programs where, we've set very ambitious targets. We've got and we've achieved most of them. So I feel that it is possible to do, but because it's a topic where you have to have action across, you need financing, you need good governance, and there needs to be an empowered group of people that's actually at the top monitoring what is happening. And now I think that we have enough data, and we have enough airshed analysis, and we have enough science-backed solutions. So we are not short of solutions or anything, but we need very strict enforcement and implementation.
A select committee, that sounds like a good idea. We really hope the government sort of takes that up as well. Ma'am, I also want to understand from you a little bit of what the future looks like here. If pollution levels remain the same, what do you think will be India's disease profile looking like in the next 10 years? Are we heading into a silent sort of chronic disease epidemic of sorts, very, very unaware, very, very complacent in handling in air pollution?
So over the years, as we've seen the risk factors for health, there's this analysis that's done every couple of years. Air pollution has been steadily climbing up as a major risk factor for health, and other things like water and sanitation and all those, many of the infectious diseases, those have, we've done well on them and they've gone down the list. So the number one is dietary risks, the food, the nutrition that we get. That's the number one risk factor for health in India today. The number two risk factor is air pollution. And this is contributed to by many sectors, but also by indoor household air pollution, that is by burning of solid mass. We know that many people are still using biomass for cooking and for heating, and also waste burning happening all over the country. Big source of pollution, which is often neglected. So it is the number two cause of, and if you look at cancer deaths today, lung cancer, smoking has gone down, but pollution has increased as a cause for lung cancer among non-smokers. If you look at COPD, chronic lung disease, heart attacks, even dementia, diabetes, there's more and more data linking air pollution to all of these chronic diseases. And we know India has a young population. We talk about our demographic dividend and the fact that this is a huge economic asset for us. Well, don't address air pollution. We're going to have an unhealthy population and we're going to lose that demographic dividend. So I think this is something which has huge economic and public health importance. And if we address it, we will see the gains very, very quickly.
But what is the best way to address it then? You talked about a select committee. Is there one policy implementation that you would like India to get in as well? If you had the power, say, to implement one policy that would really cut down India's pollution burden and, dramatically so, what would you say?
You see, I would say that we have to implement the policies we have. We do have an act, a Clean Air Act, which specifies certain emission norms. All industries are supposed to, have the real-time monitoring of their emission norms, and the pollution control boards actually do have access to such data. So that's a big source, we know. But so is construction. Again, we have norms for what the construction industry is supposed to do to reduce the dust. Similarly, we know that transport, the older the vehicle, the more the emissions. We have the standards for the BS6 and so on, but we also need investment in more public transport, particularly with clean energy, with electric buses and so on. So, other cities and other countries have done it. We can really just take the lessons from there, of course, adapt it and contextualize it. But like I said, we've got to get very serious about acting. Beijing did that. Beijing was the worst city in the world. You couldn't look out of your window and see anything. It was that thick a smog. London has done it before. Mexico City has done it. Los Angeles has done it. So, and there are cities in India that have made a very good start towards it. So I think that we have the solutions, but the implementation is key, and there we need everyone to come together. You see, by everyone, I mean all political parties must come together. Citizens and governments must come together. Center and state governments must come together. And sometimes you have to also work with other countries, because the Indo-Gangetic plain, we have Nepal, we have Bangladesh, we have Bhutan, we have Pakistan on this side. So there are common elements, that need to be addressed if we need, because air doesn't stop at any boundaries, national or state. But we can start with a national plan, and then we do have also a plan that was developed a few years ago, which was for the countries of the Indo-Gangetic, with the bordering region. So there is a plan for that as well. And there are goals that have been set for 2035. So there are many things which have already started. I think the thing is really to come together now and agree to work together to address this.
There is a chance to make it happen. It's a point of getting everybody together and forming that working group, just like we did for COVID. Will that happen? Well, we wait to see. But sticking with air pollution, now there's a new trend taking over North India these days as the city chokes under toxic air, of air purifiers that you can wear like a necklace. These are portable devices that promise to offer personal bubble to keep your air space or your breathing space at least clean. But the big question is, do they really work? I did a reality check, spoke to some doctors, spoke to some scientists, looked at research, and also tried it out myself. This is what I found. ये इंटरनेट एडवाइस नहीं, डॉक्टर की एडवाइस है. Pollution is at its peak. Toxic air is going in our lungs. Not much can be done about it, but can you and I devise a toolkit every time the air goes bad? This is what some of the best doctors in the country are telling us. Number one, wear your N95 mask always. I've only taken it off to record this. Also ensure that your air purifiers have HEPA filter, not any other filter.
भारत के बड़े शहरों में वायु प्रदूषण एक गंभीर समस्या बन चुका है. अब पेश है अटोवियो की अत्याधुनिक वेरिएबल एनायंस टेक्नोलॉजी.
If you live in North India or Delhi, you must have seen this little air purifier ad. It's everywhere. But does this really work?
वायु शुद्धिकरण का नया अनुभव करें. अटोवियो एयर प्योरीफायर चुनें.
Let's look at science. Let's look at what research and what doctors have to say about it. First up, how does this really work? What is the technology? It releases a negatively charged ion that they claim attaches itself to pollution particles, makes them heavier and pushes them out of your breathing zone. This in no way is filtering the air. It's simply trying to push the particles away from your breathing zone. We spoke to the company about the research and they shared 3 research papers with us. IIT Kanpur has also tested it. But out of the 3 tests, 2 tests were done indoors. And unless you are an astronaut, you are not wearing this indoors. You won't be able to test it. This is an outdoor product. In that outdoor study, they found roughly 40% reduction in pollution. What about doctors then? Well, Dr. Anurag Agarwal, who is the Dean of Biosciences and Health Research at Ashoka University, he says the device works better for larger particles like in scent smoke, but the evidence is much weaker for typical urban pollution. He also says that for fine particulate matter, a proper N95 mask would clearly be better. We also spoke to a pulmonologist, Dr. Vivek Nangia at Max Hospital, Delhi. He said that most tests for this device were done in controlled environments and that the most toxic particles are smaller than 0.1 microns, which might not be affected by this. So, what's the bottom line? Well, this is no way a replacement for your N95 or N99 mask. This is also not a replacement for your air purifiers with HEPA filter. What this does at best is that it gives you an extra layer of protection when you are walking around in an already purified air. So buy it only for that benefit, if at all. Also remember, when it comes to your body, trust science and doctors, not just Instagram ads.
All right, at the end of the day, your N95 or N99 mask and your air purifiers with HEPA filter, that's still your best bet to protecting yourself and your younger ones in the house against pollution. Thank you so much for watching. That's all we could crack in. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.